The room was colder than usual. Or maybe that was just me. I remember sitting there, fifth chair from the end of the long mahogany conference table, tapping my pen cap as Elliot walked in, crisp navy suit, that smug half-smile he always wore when he thought he had something clever up his sleeve. My name is Vincent Delaney. I'm 45 years old. I live just outside Cincinnati, Ohio, and until that morning, I was executive vice president of Goldspire Logistics, a company my grandfather built from scratch in the 1950s. I spent more than half my life helping build it into the freight empire it is now. That morning was supposed to be just another quarterly strategy meeting. Nothing unusual. A few slides, a coffee cart, the usual corporate posturing. But the moment Elliot stood and cleared his throat, something felt off. I could see it in the way old Merrill shifted in his chair and how Dana, someone I'd mentored for 15 years, suddenly found her notebook very interesting. Before we begin, Elliot said, sliding a folder to the center of the table, I'd like to introduce a new vision. A leadership renewal plan. Leadership renewal. That phrase hit me like a sucker punch. He kept talking, something about modernizing the executive structure, rethinking legacy roles, whatever business school jargon he'd paid 6 figures to memorize. But then he said it. Clear as day. In light of the evolving needs of our client base, we believe it's time for Vincent to consider stepping aside. Consider. That was rich? There was no considering in his tone. It wasn't a request, it was a corporate kill shot dressed up in a Brooks Brothers suit. I glanced around the room. Nobody met my eye. Merrill coughed into his fist. Dana was still staring at her notes like they might burst into flames. Even Glenn, who had gotten through a bitter divorce last year, looked down at his coffee. No one spoke. Not one damn word. I let it hang in the air for a moment. Let them feel the weight of their silence. Then I stood up, straightened my blazer, and looked Elliot dead in the eye. Good luck, I said. That was it. No speech. No protest. Just quiet resignation because I already knew something they didn't. I stepped out of that boardroom without a word, walked down the long hallway where the portraits of my grandfather and father still hung on the wall. I paused under my grandfather's for half a second, then pulled out my phone. The email was still there. I opened it again just to feel it, just to make it real. Subject, contract confirmation, Apex Transit Logistics. Total value, $12.6 million over 24 months. They had no idea. While they were busy plotting their little power play, I'd already built the next empire. Apex Transit was real. And starting today, it wasn't just an idea. It was war. After the boardroom coup, I drove for hours. Didn't really have a destination. I just needed the sound of tires on pavement and a little distance from the building I used to call home. Goldspire wasn't just a job, it was in my blood. My grandfather built it from one box truck and a stack of ledger books. My dad made it a household name in freight. And me? I kept it alive when the markets crashed, when fuel spiked, when everyone else folded. I started young. 22 and still wiping diesel off my hands when my buddies were walking into law school interviews. My dad handed me a set of keys to a long-haul rig and said, figure out what we're really selling. I did. Spent 5 years on the road, Tennessee runs, warehouse transfers in Illinois, middle-of-the-night calls when a shipment froze up in Nebraska. No shortcuts. No titles. Just sweat. And then came Elliot. Polished, camera-ready Elliot. My cousin, 8 years younger, with his Ivy League degree and perfect LinkedIn profile. He joined straight into strategy, of course, never touch a manifest, never lost a shipment in a thunderstorm. He was the type to schedule meetings just to say he was busy. The board loved him. Slick presentations, buzzwords, investor energy. My dad used to say he talks like a man with something to sell and nothing to deliver. But over time, people forgot what Goldspire stood for. Elliot started calling clients without looping me in. Quietly hired consultants to modernize our back end, which really meant freezing out everyone loyal to me. The last 2 years were like watching a house shift off its foundation. And I saw it coming. Hell, I'd been bracing for it. So I made a plan. Apex Transit started as a folder on my personal laptop. I didn't even name it at first, just plan_b.xlsx. But once I saw what Elliot was doing, I started having quiet dinners with old clients. Nothing dramatic. Just checking in. Catching up. It wasn't hard. The biggest clients, the ones that actually moved numbers, trusted me, not the name on the building. These were men and women I'd loaded pallets with, people who'd called me directly when things went south. I didn't ask for loyalty. I just asked them to be honest. If I left, I'd say over a glass of bourbon, would you follow? They didn't hesitate. Kept it clean. No files stolen. No NDAs breached. just conversations. And when I finally incorporated Apex, I did it quietly. New brand, new routes, same standards. My standards. I leased office space in Sharonville. Nothing fancy, just a converted warehouse with cheap carpet and enough room for 4 desks. And last week, when we locked down that $12 million contract, I didn't even pop champagne. I just sat there in that little office and stared at the name on the door. Apex Transit Logistics. I never planned to leave Goldspire, but Elliot made that choice for me. Funny thing is, I don't feel bitter. Not exactly. Betrayed? Sure. Wounded? Of course. But mostly, I feel ready. The call came the next morning. I was at the Apex office, still getting used to how quiet it was without 20 years of noise and bureaucracy around me. No assistant knocking on my door. No intercom crackling with, "You've got a Mr. Hall from procurement on line 2. Just silence, save for the hum of the old HVAC unit and the occasional truck horn from the road outside. My phone lit up. Elliot Delaney. I let it ring twice before I answered. "Morning," I said, calm as ever. There was no greeting on his end. Just a pause, then a sharp exhale. "We have a problem," he said. I almost smiled. "Do we?" "3 of our top clients pulled out this morning," he said quickly, like the words were racing each other out of his mouth. "Lakeshore, Midpoint, and Reliant. They canceled all outstanding orders. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you?" "Sure," I said, leaning back in my chair. "They're with me now." He went quiet. "You're kidding." "Nope," I said, popping the P. "Signed the contracts last week. Full-service freight. We've already mapped out their Q3 schedules." "You took them from us?" "I didn't take anything, Elliot. They left. There's no non-compete. No breach. Just relationships. Ones I built." "You know how this looks," he snapped. "I know exactly how it looks. I just don't care." He swore under his breath. I could hear the tension rising. Papers rustling. A drawer slamming shut. "You realize we could sue." "For what? Talking to clients I've known for 20 years? There's no proprietary data involved. No contracts broken. They chose us. Freely." Silence again. I imagined him sitting at my old desk, fingers tightening around a pen, staring out the window trying to piece together how this all flipped on him so fast. "We're family, Vincent." That made me pause. Just a second. "That was yesterday," I said. He didn't respond right away. "I didn't think you'd actually go through with it," he muttered finally. "All that talk about loyalty, about legacy." "And I meant it," I interrupted. "But you threw me out like a line item. You want loyalty, Elliot? Try earning it." The sound of his breathing changed. Slower. Defeated. "You know how much this hurts the company," he said quietly. "Then maybe you shouldn't have underestimated the man who helped build it." Click. I set the phone down gently and stared at it for a long moment. Not because I felt triumphant, but because, for the first time, Elliot finally understood. This wasn't just about strategy. This was personal. And the game had already changed. It was just past lunch when I heard the knock at the Apex office door. No one ever knocked, not yet. Most people just texted. I figured it was a delivery or maybe someone lost looking for the industrial park next door. But when I opened the door, I saw him, Uncle Harold, still in his blazer, even though it was pushing 80 degrees out. His tie was slightly loose, but the man carried himself like he was walking into a shareholder meeting, not my dusty startup warehouse. "Vincent," he said with a curt nod. "Got a minute?" I stepped aside. "Sure." He took in the place, the bare walls, the makeshift desks, the startup energy of it all, and for a second I could see the calculation in his eyes. Harold had been COO at Goldspire for decades. Retired 2 years ago, but he still sat on the board, which meant he hadn't come to reminisce. He came with a purpose. "You've made quite the move," he said, settling into the plastic chair across from my desk. "I didn't have much choice." "Didn't you?" he countered, raising an eyebrow. I said nothing. He sighed and leaned forward. "Elliot's in trouble. The kind you don't come back from easy." I shrugged. "Should have thought about that before trying to shove me out." Harold didn't flinch. This isn't about feelings, Vincent. It's about numbers. Hard ones. I waited. After your contracts pulled, our debt-to-revenue ratio cratered. Elliot had taken out expansion loans, big ones, leveraging projections from those same clients. When they pulled out, the banks started circling. If we miss 2 more quarterly payments, the covenants kick in. We're talking asset seizures. Maybe worse. I leaned back. And now you want me to clean up his mess? No, Harold said quickly. We want to stop a full collapse. There it was. Not about pride. Not about fixing a relationship. Just saving what was left before it all burned down. Why should I help? I asked flatly. Harold hesitated, then said quietly, because it's not just Elliot who gets crushed. Collapse means hundreds of jobs gone. Drivers with families, back office folks, some of whom you trained yourself. And family money, your dad's retirement, your aunt's nest egg, all tied up in Goldspire stock. I looked away. He kept going. This isn't about bailing out Elliot. It's about preserving what's still standing. What your grandfather built. I clenched my jaw. He knew exactly what buttons to press. The legacy, the people, the shared past. But the wound was still fresh. I could still see Elliot's face, smug and certain, when he pulled the rug out from under me. I gave everything to that company, I said quietly, and they treated me like a speed bump. I know, Harold said, and I'm not here to excuse that, but this isn't about them anymore. It's about the rest of us. He stood, smoothing his tie. Think about it. That's all I'm asking. And with that, he left. No pitch, no threats, just the quiet reminder of what was at stake. I sat there for a long time after the door closed, thinking about all the people who'd stuck by me over the years, thinking about my father's face when he used to walk through the Goldspire warehouse like it was sacred ground. I didn't know Elliot a damn thing. But maybe, just maybe, I owed something to everything we used to stand for. It started with a voicemail. Hey Vince, we're gonna have to pause our agreement. Just for a few weeks. Got a call from a guy at Goldspire. Said working with you might cause problems down the road. That was from Paul Harris, a subcontractor I'd used for nearly a decade. Solid guy. We'd built trust hauling freight through every storm Ohio had to offer. But now his voice was tight, nervous. Like someone had a gun pointed just off mic. An hour later, another message. Different subcontractor, same story. By the end of the day, 5 crews had pulled out. No warnings. No explanations that made sense, except one. Elliot. He was hitting back. I should have expected it. Should have known that after the panic wore off, he'd retaliate the only way he knew how. Quietly, and below the belt. I paced the office, trying to think 3 steps ahead while emails kept popping up like little landmines. Subject: contract delays urgent. Subject: possible conflict with Goldspire, clarification needed. One even came from a client's assistant. Our legal department has flagged concerns due to recent communications from your former employer. Elliot wasn't just threatening contractors, he was throwing shade at clients now too, stirring doubts. Implying that doing business with me would complicate their logistics networks. He wasn't protecting Goldspire. He was torching anything with my name on it. I picked up my phone, called one of the subcontractors directly. Ray, I said, keeping my voice calm. Talk to me. Long pause. Then he exhaled. Vincent, man. They called my dispatcher. Said if we ran your loads, they'd blacklist us from every Goldspire route in the tri-state area. That's illegal, I said. They didn't put it in writing, he muttered. And no one wants to be the guy who loses half their routes over pride. You know how thin margins are right now. I did. I knew all of it. And that's what made this so damn infuriating. By Thursday, we were hemorrhaging capacity. Routes that were scheduled, confirmed, locked in, gone. Drivers backed out. Dispatchers ghosted us. And the worst part? We had deadlines approaching. Real ones. Apex was about to make its first high-profile deliveries. And now we had gaps in the schedule big enough to drive a convoy through. I stayed late that night, pacing in the dark, phone glowing in my hand, screen full of cancellations. I kept replaying Harold's words in my head. It's not just Elliot who gets crushed. But Elliot wasn't playing defense. He was out to wreck me, before Apex could even stand on its own legs. This wasn't about family. This wasn't even about pride anymore. It was about survival. And Elliot had just declared war. Not with a press release. Not with a lawsuit. With fear. He was betting I'd fold. That I'd go crawling back. That I'd take the hit and disappear quietly. But if he thought I built this company without planning for a knife in the back, he didn't know me at all. Fine. He wanted a war? I give him one. Not with fists. With strategy. My father lived in a modest brick ranch out in Westchester. Retired now. Spent most of his days in the garage tinkering with old radios or watching grainy westerns on a 20-year-old TV set he refused to upgrade. The man never chased flash, never cared about quarterly margins or strategic overhauls. But he built Goldspire with my grandfather brick by brick, deal by deal, mile by mile. That afternoon I pulled into his driveway, heart beating a little too fast. I hadn't seen him since the coup. I didn't know what he'd heard or which side of the story had reached him first. But after everything Elliot had just pulled, I needed to know where he stood. Or if he even cared anymore. He was in the backyard, sitting under the faded striped awning, nursing a glass of iced tea. When he saw me, he squinted, shaded his eyes. "Well," he said, setting the glass down. "Look who finally got sick of brooding." I sat down across from him without a word. He waited a beat, then asked, "You here to tell me I raised a traitor?" I blinked. "Is that what Elliot told you?" He snorted. That boy couldn't tell the truth if it came with a quarterly bonus. We sat in silence for a minute. Just the wind rustling through the maples. It was strange how calm it all was out here while everything else was unraveling. "You built that company," he said finally. "From the inside out?" "I watched you do it. Driving rigs, eating garbage truck stop food, shaking hands in warehouses with no heat. You earned every inch." I swallowed hard. Didn't matter. Not to the board. Not to him. "No," he said, leaning back. "Because Elliot didn't care about the company. He cared about the illusion of leadership. All polish, no grit." There was no joy in his voice. No satisfaction in being right. "I talked to Harold," I said. "He says the company's in worse shape than I thought." He nodded, rubbing a hand over his face. "Elliot didn't just consolidate power. He mortgaged the damn future. Took out loans against next year's revenue like it was guaranteed. Promised growth we didn't have the infrastructure for. If the banks call in their notes, it's over." I stared at the cracked concrete under my feet. Then why didn't anyone stop him? Because the suits loved his pitch decks. Because the board wanted shiny and new. Because no one thought the man sweeping the floor might have known more than the guy pointing at charts. He looked at me then. Really looked. "You were right to walk out, Vincent. But now you've got to decide something harder." I looked up. "What's that?" "Whether you want to see the house burn just to prove you were right." That hit me harder than anything Elliot ever said. I wanted to say I didn't care. That Goldspire was no longer my problem. But I couldn't lie to the man who taught me what loyalty meant. "It's not about revenge," I muttered. "Then prove it," he said, standing. "Do something none of them could. Make peace with being better than the bastards who tore you down." He started to walk inside, then paused. "I may not say it much, but I'm proud of you." And just like that, he was gone. Door swinging shut behind him, leaving me with nothing but the echo of those words and the weight of a choice I wasn't sure I wanted to make. The next morning, I was back in the Apex office before sunrise, staring at a legal pad I hadn't touched in days. Not strategizing. Not planning revenge. Just thinking. I kept hearing my dad's voice. "Do something none of them could." And Harold's. "It's not about Elliot anymore." They were right, even if I didn't want them to be. This wasn't about sticking it to my cousin. I'd already won that round. But if I pushed any harder, there might not be anything left of Goldspire to save. Just scorched earth. So I made a call. Then another. Then 3 more. By noon, 5 of the biggest clients Apex had secured were all on the calendar for a joint meeting, neutral ground, off-site, no logos, no boardrooms. Just people around a table. We met 2 days later in the back room of a local steakhouse we all liked. I wore a button-down and jeans. No pitch deck. Just a folder and a simple idea. "Gentlemen," I said after they'd all taken a seat, "I didn't bring you here to sell you anything. You already know what I can do. And you know what Goldspire used to be." I paused. Watched their faces. No one interrupted. The company's in free fall. Elliot gambled big on expansion he couldn't fund, and when I left, I took your contracts with me. That alone might be enough to push them under. Murmurs. Nods. They knew. "But here's the thing," I continued. "I don't want to be the guy who burned down a legacy just to prove a point. I opened the folder. Inside was a proposal, short, clean, and written in plain English. Apex Transit keeps 2 of the 5 contracts we've secured. The other 3 return to Goldspire, but under a new partnership. Joint delivery hubs. Shared resources. Non-competing routes. They leaned in. Goldspire gets a lifeline. Apex keeps its independence. Everyone keeps moving freight. What's the catch? One of them asked, brows furrowed. I slid a second page forward. Elliot steps down. Permanently. An independent CEO is appointed by the board, someone vetted by both sides. I won't run Goldspire, but I won't compete to destroy it either. Silence. Then a low whistle. You really think he'll agree to that? He doesn't have a choice, I said. Not if he wants the company to survive. They all signed off, every one of them. By the end of the day, the document was in Elliot's inbox, stamped with the names of Goldspire's top 5 accounts and a line that made the stakes crystal clear. Sign or lose them forever. Elliot called that evening. His voice was hollow. No smugness. No spin. You really put this together? He asked. I did. He hesitated. And you're keeping just 2? That's right. And you'll walk away from the rest? As long as you walk away from the top floor. Another pause. Then a broken breath. I'll sign. It hit me harder than I expected. Not joy. Not triumph. Just relief. For the first time in months, I wasn't fighting anymore. I wasn't climbing or clawing or proving anything. I was building again. Not just a company. A future. 6 months later, I was standing on a gravel lot just outside Dayton, hard hat on, blueprints flapping in the wind. Behind me, crews were pouring concrete for what would become Apex Transit's first regional hub, 12 loading docks, refrigerated bays, solar-integrated roofing. Nothing flashy but efficient. Smart. Mine. I watched as one of the foremen barked directions to a forklift driver who was trying not to drop a pallet of steel beams. The chaos, the dust, the smell of wet cement, it all felt good. Familiar. Real. Apex was thriving. We'd grown slow and steady. No debt. No promises we couldn't keep. I still had the 2 major clients from the early days, and since the partnership deal, a couple more had come knocking. Carefully. Quietly. Trust built contract by contract. Goldspire? They were still standing. Barely. But the new CEO, some logistics veteran Harold found out of Memphis, had scaled back Elliot's ridiculous expansion dreams. Downsized. Reorganized. Got lean. They'd stopped bleeding, which in freight was sometimes the biggest win you could ask for. Elliot had moved to Seattle. Word was he was trying to start a consulting firm. Something about disruption strategy and next-gen freight modeling. I didn't ask. I didn't care. Not really. But what surprised me was what I did care about. I was at a client lunch last week, some barbecue joint in Lebanon, messy and loud and absolutely perfect, when the VP of the distribution group leaned over and said, "Hey, you hear from Elliot lately?" I raised an eyebrow. Why would I? He shrugged. He reached out to our office. Asked for a contact at Apex. Said he wanted to apologize. Maybe grab coffee sometime. I didn't respond right away. Apologize? I wasn't sure what surprised me more, that he said it or that he meant it. I didn't follow up. Didn't call. Didn't block his number either. That was the thing. I didn't feel angry anymore. Didn't feel like proving anything. The weight I'd been carrying, my last name, my father's expectations, the betrayal, the scramble to start over, it had all settled into something quieter. Not peace exactly, but something close enough. After lunch that day, I stopped by the job site. Talked to the foreman. Checked the blueprints. Signed off on the concrete order. Then I walked the perimeter by myself. It was quiet except for the hum of machinery and the occasional clang of metal. I stood there in the center of that rising foundation, hands in my pockets, boots covered in dust, and realized something that made me smile. I wasn't building to prove anything anymore. I wasn't trying to win. I was just building. Forward. And that was enough. 1 year to the day. 12 months since I stood up, adjusted my blazer, and walked out of the Goldspire boardroom for the last time. I didn't plan on marking the anniversary, not really. But that morning, while reviewing freight numbers and contractor schedules over black coffee in my office, something pulled at me. A quiet itch in the back of my mind that said, go see it. So I drove. The Goldspire headquarters hadn't changed much on the outside. Same red brick building, same manicured hedges, same faded loading bay signs that I helped design back when we first rebranded in 2009. But the tone? That was different. The parking lot was less full, the front desk didn't buzz with the same anxious energy. It felt human again. Smaller, quieter. Like the company had taken a breath after nearly suffocating. I walked through the front doors. No one stopped me. No one rushed to escort me out or whisper awkward greetings. A few familiar faces nodded. One of the receptionists offered a smile. The good kind. Not pity. Not discomfort. Just warmth. I made my way to the boardroom on the second floor. I didn't know why. I just needed to see it again. To face the place where everything had shifted. When I stepped inside, I froze. The wall had been redone, new paint, sleeker lighting, and where the massive Goldspire logo used to hang, there were now 3 framed black and white photos in neat alignment. The first was my grandfather standing beside the company's first delivery truck. He looked young, proud, sleeves rolled up. The second was my father cutting the ribbon at the opening of our first warehouse in Indianapolis back when expansion meant 1 site, not 15. And the third? Me. From a logistics summit 5 years ago, mid-speech, hand raised as I explained route efficiency to a crowd of execs. I hadn't even known they took that picture. I didn't hear him come in. You were the only one who ever made that room feel like a team, my dad said quietly. I turned. He looked older, like time had finally caught up. But his eyes were steady. Clear. I didn't ask for that, I said, nodding toward the photo. I know, he replied. That's why it's there. We stood in silence for a while. Just the two of us. No suits. No politics. Just the old man and his son standing inside the house they helped build. I'm proud of you, he said again. It landed different this time. No conditions. No wait. Just the truth. I didn't stay long. Didn't need to. I nodded to a few folks on my way out, walked down the same hallway I'd once stormed through, and stepped back into the afternoon sunlight. No triumph. No bitterness. Just clarity. Legacy doesn't live in a nameplate. It lives in the work. In the way people remember you long after you're gone. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel cast out. I felt complete.